Fyodor Dostoevsky is universally acknowledged as a towering figure in the annals of literature. His narratives are profoundly imbued with searching explorations of the human psyche, particularly its intricate engagement with the diverse social and political frameworks of contemporary society, earning him a reputation as much a distinguished psychologist as a profound philosopher. His writings challenge our assumptions about self-awareness, our true desires, and the methods we employ to contemplate and achieve these aspirations in the world, along with the repercussions of pursuing misleading illusions and unattainable ideals. The prescient observations and cautionary messages he offered regarding humankind, both on an individual and societal level, were not merely advanced for his era. In numerous respects, they remain compelling yet largely unacknowledged admonitions of profound significance in our current time. Early life. In 1821, Fyodor Dostoevsky first saw the light of day in Moscow, Russia, born into a prosperous family adhering to Orthodox Christian traditions. His sire was a respected physician, and the family resided within the precincts of the medical institution where he practiced. During his adolescent years, tragedy struck when his mother succumbed to consumption. Later, while Dostoevsky was pursuing engineering studies away from home, his father passed away under circumstances that remain unclear, though rumors and conjectures suggested he met his end at the hands of his own serfs, a retaliatory act against his harsh treatment of them. The youthful Dostoevsky's close exposure to the hospital environment, his rearing within a devout household, and the premature loss of both his parents, particularly the enigmatic potential homicide of his father, undoubtedly contributed to shaping the nascent elements of the distinctive yet sorrowful literary voice he would later develop. Upon completing his studies at a military engineering academy, Dostoevsky initially pursued a career as an engineer. Nevertheless, to nurture his burgeoning interest in literature and the humanities, he concurrently undertook the translation of books. When this literary ardor intensified, he eventually relinquished his engineering post to dedicate himself entirely to his own writing. In 1846, his debut novel titled Poor Folk was released. This publication immediately garnered commercial acclaim and positive critiques from contemporary literary figures, who hailed it as Russia's pioneering social novel. Yet the works by Dostoevsky that came immediately after this initial triumph found it challenging to achieve comparable recognition, and he soon experienced a period of largely unsuccessful experimentation as an author, leading swiftly to financial hardship. Driven partly by his monetary difficulties, Dostoevsky, then in his late 20s, aligned himself in 1847 with a circle of progressive writers and thinkers centered on the ideals of utopian socialism. This association unfortunately resulted in his arrest when the authorities began to suppress individuals connected with such movements. Consequently, in 1849, Dostoevsky received a death sentence to be carried out by a firing squad. On the 22nd of December of that very year, he found himself confronting the muzzles of rifles aimed directly at him. His remaining lifespan was reduced to mere moments. Just as the executioners took aim and prepared to fire, a dispatch arrived unexpectedly at the final instant, and Dostoevsky's sentence was commuted. This ordeal was revealed to be a simulated execution, a psychological ploy designed solely to terrorize the condemned men. Subsequently, Dostoevsky was exiled to Siberia, where he endured 4 years of arduous labor under dreadful circumstances. Upon his return from Siberia in 1860, Dostoevsky was profoundly changed. He recommenced his literary pursuits shortly thereafter, but his writing now bore a new inflection characterized by pessimism, a stark realism, and an exceptionally keen insight into the human mind. His perspective had shifted away from societal utopianism. His attention was now directed internally towards investigations of a spiritual and psychological nature. During the subsequent 20 years prior to his death from a pulmonary ailment in 1881, Dostoevsky authored a series of triumphant literary achievements, a considerable number of which continue to be esteemed among the most significant literary works ever produced, such as Notes from Underground, Crime and Punishment, The Idiot, Demons, and The Brothers Karamazov. A central motif woven through many of Dostoevsky's writings involved his reflections on and evaluation of human affliction, specifically the methods employed and the outcomes resulting from humankind's attempts to conquer and eradicate suffering. This was particularly pertinent in an era where traditional religious and spiritual moorings were being severed, leaving individuals and communities to construct and justify their philosophies through a growing reliance on reason and technological advancement in pursuit of an imagined state of flawless contentment. Notes from Underground Within. Notes from Underground, which saw publication in 1864. Dostoevsky scrutinizes and challenges these prevailing modern Western concepts. The pursuit of flawless joy and virtue through reason and technological advancement. The narrative unfolds through the journal entries of an anonymous former government employee, commonly identified as the Underground Man. This individual is profoundly embittered and miserable, harboring a contempt for other people and the illusions they embrace. His desire is to compel others to recognize the reality and admit to the identical dissatisfaction and meaninglessness that he himself perceives and experiences in existence. In Dostoevsky's view, suffering constitutes an inherent aspect of the human condition, deeply ingrained in our very being. Consequently, no form of existence nor any societal or material circumstance can be devoid of suffering. Therefore, according to Dostoevsky, every endeavor and achievement aimed at progress, whether on an individual or collective scale, serves only to alter the specific sources of our suffering, rather than to eradicate suffering in its entirety. Man only likes to count his troubles. He doesn't calculate his happiness, wrote Dostoevsky. As Dostoevsky perceived it, because no societal or material framework can ever liberate humanity from discontent or affliction, any goal to refine the world into an idealized utopian state is fated for failure. Employing the character of the Underground Man, Dostoevsky extensively criticizes and cautions against mankind's pursuit of such ideals when guided by the increasingly widespread philosophies of nihilism, utopianism, rationalism, and egoism. These philosophies essentially converge on the convictions that life possesses no intrinsic or higher purpose, and that conduct and ethics ought to be founded upon logic and information, with personal gain as the primary motivator. Dostoevsky contended nonetheless that in the absence of religious conviction and given the profoundly imperfect illogical nature of humans, Such a philosophical outlook would ultimately prove ruinous when attempting to eliminate suffering in a quest for perfection. The remedies for existing issues invariably spawn fresh difficulties requiring new remedies. And the more ambitious these remedies, the more intricate and potentially damaging the resultant problems become. This does not imply that endeavors towards societal, technological, or personal betterment are futile or intrinsically detrimental. Rather, they are incapable of achieving their frequently stated objectives. Furthermore, if undertaken without regard for the limitations inherent in the human condition, their relentless pursuit can merely exacerbate existing troubles. In Notes from Underground, Dostoevsky articulated, "Now I ask you, what can be expected of man since he is a being endowed with strange qualities? Shower upon him every earthly blessing. Drown him in a sea of happiness so that nothing but bubbles of bliss can be seen on the surface. Give him economic prosperity such that he should have nothing else to do but sleep, eat cakes and busy himself with the continuation of his species, and even then out of sheer ingratitude, sheer spite, man would play you some nasty trick. He would even risk his cakes and would deliberately desire the most fatal rubbish, the most uneconomical absurdity, simply to introduce into all this positive good sense his fatal fantastic element. It is just his fantastic dreams, his vulgar folly that he will desire to retain simply in order to prove to himself, as though that were so necessary, that men still are men and not the keys of a piano. According to Dostoevsky, humankind is inherently irrational and ceaselessly craves a feeling of personal autonomy, not flawless contentment. Therefore, even if presented with an impeccable existence or a society where happiness was effortlessly available to all through a set formula, humanity would prefer to descend into madness or dismantle its ideal circumstances rather than exist as though it were merely a component in a mechanistic apparatus. We believe ourselves to desire happiness, yet in truth we often do not profoundly. This becomes evident each instance we possess the potential for happiness but fail to achieve it. Each moment we discover some new trinket to fixate upon, a grievance to voice, or an opportunity to undermine. Our conscious awareness seems to assert our longing for joy, tranquility, and absolute fairness. Yet our entire essence, our actions, and our collective past demonstrate that frequently we desire the very antithesis. Our self-knowledge is less comprehensive than we presume, and even when we do gain insight, we often find it difficult to embrace the reality. Crime and Punishment. In his succeeding magnum opus, Crime and Punishment, released in 1866, Dostoevsky delves deeper into this concept of self-understanding, or its absence. The narrative revolves around a young, impoverished ex-student of law, Rodion Raskolnikov. Raskolnikov's mother and sibling make considerable sacrifices in an attempt to alleviate his circumstances and enable his advancement, his sister going so far as to arrange a marriage with a prosperous gentleman for this purpose. These efforts, however, only serve to further distress and humiliate Raskolnikov. Furthermore, he is profoundly influenced by a nihilistic, rationalist, and atheistic worldview. Guided by these perspectives and feeling no obligation to religious or spiritual tenets, Raskolnikov resolves to murder and plunder a malevolent, exploitative elderly pawnbroker who, he learns, possesses a significant sum of money. He subscribes to the idea that ethical choices should be predicated on what reason dictates will yield the maximum overall benefit for society, or the most happiness for the greatest number of individuals. Consequently, he convinces himself that he is more entitled to the funds than the old woman, reasoning that he can accomplish far greater good with them. He envisions assisting his mother and sister completing his legal education and subsequently performing even more benevolent acts in the world. Moreover, he perceives himself as a person of exceptional stature, capability, and decisiveness. In his conception, remarkable individuals are permitted to transgress laws for the sake of the greater good. Thus, he manages to rationalize homicide and carries out the killing of the pawnbroker, followed by her half-sister, who inadvertently interrupts the crime. For the remainder of the narrative, Raskolnikov is plagued by torment, consumed by guilt and horror stemming from his deeds. He discovers he is not the person he imagined himself to be. He lacks the constitution of a mercilessly powerful individual. Instead, he is a man of sensitivity and deep emotion. Ultimately, he surrenders to the authorities primarily to prevent himself from succumbing to madness. By depicting Raskolnikov's guilt and anguish, Dostoevsky challenges the adequacy of reason and self-interest as sole determinants of morality and personal identity. Raskolnikov possessed a logical justification for his actions, yet his deed was undeniably wrong, leading him to experience profound pain and suffering. Similarly to his approach in Notes from Underground, Dostoevsky here revisits his critique of nihilistic, utilitarian, rationalist, and egoistic philosophies, wherein ultimate significance and trust are vested entirely in the individual, and all endeavors to optimize life and society are pursued through the lenses of self-interest and pure logic. Echoing themes from Notes from Underground, Crime and Punishment highlights the intricate nature of the human psyche and the frequent disconnect between our conscious self-perception, the image we project and believe ourselves to be, and our true underlying nature. Furthermore, our understanding of others is often even more distorted from reality. Dostoevsky not only illustrates Raskolnikov's profoundly mistaken and inverted self-image, but also enables the reader to connect with and feel for Raskolnikov, despite his being a calculating killer. Instead of merely tracing the development of a villainous figure, Dostoevsky reveals that such a character is not entirely evil and in numerous aspects resembles us. Deeply perplexed and led astray by internal psychological conflicts and a flawed comprehension of that very psyche. For every one of us, the intricate dance between our conscious awareness, our subconscious depths, and the external world is a turbulent, confused, and paradoxical affair, perhaps forever beyond complete comprehension. We are none of us so distant from those individuals we dread or detest. Within them lies a fragment of ourselves, and within us a fragment of them. Our self-knowledge is more limited than we imagine. We pursue objectives we do not genuinely desire, and frequently we recoil from what we truly yearn for. Our rationality is far more restricted than we believe. We display a form of lunacy in our daily lives and across generations. Christian tenets and utopian philosophies predispose us to failure. Scientific endeavor offers no ultimate salvation, and technological advancement is not a path to elude our difficulties, but merely a more effective way of reconfiguring them. Dostoevsky held all these convictions, and it can be argued that, at least to some extent, his assessments were accurate. Nonetheless, as Crime and Punishment concludes, Raskolnikov is incarcerated, serving a mere 8-year term, having performed acts of kindness. The book closes with an intimation that Raskolnikov's narrative is not yet over, implying Dostoevsky's conviction that even through suffering, faith, acceptance, compassion, and contrition, the possibility of redemption remains. Redemption, while Dostoevsky's oeuvre is predominantly somber and filled with tragedy, it also presents a kind of concluding note of redemption, almost in defiance of its own prevailing tone, or at least a particular form of redemption. In his 1869 novel, The Idiot, Dostoevsky, through the protagonist Prince Mishkin, contemplates some of his own life experiences and cherished principles. At one point, Prince Mishkin relates a story of a man detailing his arrest and sentencing to a simulated execution by firing squad, an account that strikingly parallels Dostoevsky's own ordeal from many years before. Prince Mishkin recounts, "He had about 5 minutes left to live, not more. He said those 5 minutes seemed like an endless time to him, an enormous wealth. He reckoned up the time for bidding his comrades farewell and allotted 2 minutes to that, then allotted 2 more minutes to thinking about himself for the last time, and then to looking around for the last time. He was dying at the age of 27, healthy and strong. Bidding farewell to his comrades, he remembered asking one of them a rather irrelevant question and even being very interested in the answer. Then after he had bidden his comrades farewell, the 2 minutes came that he had allotted to thinking about himself. He knew beforehand what he was going to think about. He kept wanting to picture to himself as quickly and vividly as possible how it could be like this. Now he exists and lives, and in 3 minutes there would be something, some person or thing, but who? And where? He wanted to resolve it all in those 2 minutes. There was a church nearby, and the top of the cathedral with its gilded dome shone in the bright sun. He remembered gazing with terrible fixity at that dome and the rays shining from it. It seemed to him that those were his new nature, and in 3 minutes he would somehow merge with them. The ignorance of and loathing for this new thing that would be and would come presently were terrible. Yet he said that nothing was more oppressive for him at that moment than the constant thought, "What if I were not to die? What if life were given back to me? What infinity, and it would all be mine? Then I'd turn each minute into a whole age. I'd lose nothing. I'd reckon up every minute separately. I'd let nothing be wasted." He said that in the end this thought turned into such anger in him that he wished they would hurry up and shoot him. Through this passage, Dostoevsky arguably hints at the notion that even though existence is frequently tragic, absolute innocence and flawless virtue are unattainable, and suffering is an inescapable part of being. The acute realization of being mere moments from forfeiting everything is so profoundly dreadful that an individual might genuinely